I've been wanting to actually discuss this idea for a long time. Actually, I never really have. I've kind of kept secrets for, around 10 years or so more. And what it is, I kind of went back over recording. I'm using a Sony ICDB M1 recorder device that was right now it's kind of obsolete perhaps, but clearly you can tell the sound quality is decent. It's 12-year-old equipment, I guess. And you can't even, 9 years ago they stopped making the little memory cards that were only able to be used on this, and they're 128 megabyte maximum. So now you can think about it. You get, built-in 4 gigabyte memory. But yeah, this is what we have. We have some things about recordings you can make in certain areas. Usually abandoned buildings. I mean, that's what it is. You'll find a place somewhere. You drive out to Indiana or someplace. And we're in Solera, Indiana, is where I went to, and there was an abandoned building that was part of St. Joseph College. And what it is, you have what's called an Indian Normal School. It's an old school, century old. And it was abandoned around the 70s, and they stopped using it for a dormitory because they converted it into that. But yeah, they basically had this church, and there's all these different things going on in the cemetery and everything. And I went around that area, and I also recorded near my place in Texas. And in both places, I've recorded things that I have convinced me easily that there is a spirit, that I consider myself an atheist, sort of, but I studied into the Egyptian mythologies and things, and the Heliopolis and Hermopolis cult religions, basically, to know about why when the Jews had went out of Egypt, they had always kind of kept these secrets. They kept this knowledge with them. And what it is, you basically, you went from Egypt, you went to Babylon, you went to these various places, and what you had these kind of concepts, secrets about the human mind, sort of, or how people would, when you go into the states of death or near-death experience, you could induce this experience of the afterlife, basically. People had a very strong concept of spirituality, and this is where these things came from. So I don't know. Throughout you'll see a bunch of things involving our modern society still even. And so why do you hear about these weird things going on all around us? The idea that, there's a Moloch death cult or something, or some kind of weird thing like that. I mean, it sounds completely absurd, and maybe that's where these things came from. But why do we kind of forget about the spirituality part, though? Why is it we've kind of considered, in our religions even, we teach you don't have an afterlife on Earth. You don't encounter this phenomena. If you do, it's a demonic phenomena. It's an evil phenomena. Whatever that means. So I think we've been lied to. I think we've been lied to our entire lives. I think we've brought up in a lie, brought up to believe things that probably aren't in our best interest if you were to be kind of brought into the system, this kind of matrix that people call. It's kind of like that. I mean, it's, what do you make of it? How do you think of the idea of a God concept if it can't prove God, it can't prove the spirit, and you think of things in a way that takes you out of that concept, the idea that maybe there's some communication, conduit that we kind of are out of touch with. We'd only see what we are aware of visually. It's like looking at a prism, a light goes through it, you have the colors of the spectrum of light. That's what you're seeing. But so light does exist in color. It has things about it that you can see, you can hear, in a way also auditorily around us. Those sound frequencies we are aware of. If we have other frequencies outside of that spectrum, you don't see it. Or what you're seeing is a vibration of air. Air transmits sound. That's how you see it, usually. So yeah, what are we seeing? If you're recording things and you call it an EVP, is it extra low frequency? Is it magnetic that you're hearing? So when you record things, is that why you don't hear these things? It sounds auditorily in recording, you hear it, you know it's there. If you hear something, that's what you hear. It's like hearing the sound of your cell phone reaching a signal and it beeps in your recording device. So you hear that because you're hearing electromagnetic frequencies disrupting the recording device. That's why you see that. And the cell phone, it's a good example of how magnetism or electronics can interfere. So you're looking at energy. You're looking at the idea, the energy. And when you think about it, like we are ourselves energy, we're all atoms or composed of. what seems to be very physical, very, solid object, basically. In truth, I mean, we're really a very, very much empty space completely. It's like if you take away the vibrational frequency, it's like looking at a radio frequency, and you're hearing that transmitted from the upper atmosphere, and it's going into the clouds, and it's bouncing back in, and we hear that's the radio. And you only hear that if you have your radio attuned to that frequency. So you only hear that because that's what it's designed to do. You don't hear those radio frequencies, you hear it from an audio device. So what you're saying, we are what we see, we are our consciousness, intrinsic to our own sense of self and composure with our existence we're aware of. So what are you looking at? I mean, right now I'm kind of looking at this. I'm going over my old recordings, and I'm always kind of amazed. I'm hearing recording aspects that, are interacting with me in a way that I just didn't expect. I didn't expect, to walk into a building that no one goes into because it's abandoned. You can be arrested also doing so. And yeah, you hear about things like evidently people who would go in there. Typically, the first thing you would do if you were there and you knew somebody else intruded into your building, you'd accuse them of being a thief, right? Or something like that. And, that's what you record those things, you hear this, you go back in, you forget about your recordings, don't even look back over them, but you go into that recording again, forgetting about it after a couple, 5 years or so. And you come across these things, and that's the thing. The reality is, I've actually done a lot of recordings. I actually went through a lot of these things, and usually I'm pretty surprised. You'll hear very clear, very nuanced, understandable, transparent communication processes done by, when I'm all by myself, no one else is with me. I'm not getting, radio amplitude modulations or something, some kind of interference or disruption of, how I'm transferring recordings, in different ways. It's all what it is. It's what it is. It's recording things using what appears to be electronic medium as a way of communicating by these spirits. And that's what they are. They are spirit. They exist. We exist. But we just don't know we have that capability. Because we're always thinking we're alive. We are alive. But in truth, we're probably already have always been kind of dead in a sense. I mean, what is time? What is our understanding of it? And it's kind of one of the ideas that maybe we are living in a kind of an energy, matrix of time. Like we're not really aware of our present. We're kind of living in a ripple effect of, repeated memory of something from the past. But that's not what this is. We're looking at consciousness. We're looking at, the idea that we are here in the present, and even when we die, we're still there, perhaps, if we die in a way that allows for that to be existing. I mean, it's possible maybe we could, be in a vegetative state and then die, and are we back to our soul, existence from before that, or no? I mean, I don't think we are, but I mean, clearly you're looking at this various phenomena that no doubt exist. We are kind of like crystals. We absorb energy all the time. We're told, if we're around a bunch of electronic equipment, we can actually get cancer or something. There's evidence that it is true. We can absorb energies like, the sun beats down on us, and we, absorb those radiations. And, so we come to consideration, is it, are we all in this sort of environment, constantly interacting things, and we get distracted easily because we're always surrounded by the immediacy, the immediate gratification, the primacy effect of our immediate surroundings that we pay attention to. So we're going into this perception that maybe we understand our Bible or our knowledge of what we think is in the news or something. We're using our left brain. We're using our logic of deduction, and that we're only giving ourselves the information that we are presenting to ourselves in our immediate surroundings, and we take that with primacy. We think that is our truth, our knowledge, And so, you could look at philosophy. You could say, that various philosophers would say, you are only aware of your surroundings, in a sense that the most likely truth to anything in your reality is what people have agreed upon. So maybe you can get propaganda, you can get all these things, all these ideas about what is the truth, what is our needs, and we could be exploited by that possibility. So you're not really into that truth, you're not getting into the truth of, in fact, getting distracted, understanding only what is presented to you through, your surroundings and your advertisements or whatever. So it's like kind of like looking at the movie They Live, and you'll go in there, you'll realize, in your life that maybe there's something about perception, and that you put your sunglasses on and you have a totally different sight of what is around you. So based off perception, what is the light reaching you? What is... I basically also bought into a tri-field EMF recorder or meter, and what it does, you can actually look into the actual frequencies you have and how you see things in a way that could have account for spectrums of energy that you wouldn't otherwise be aware of and see. And so you can look at a big crystal, put it in front of you, take a tri-field meter or EMF meter for that matter, and just simply notice the actual frequency or radio existence. You can actually interfere with those things, and also know that there's some interactions with sometimes electronics where you will go into those situations, or recording, and the battery will just die on you or something. It does occur. Things occur, things exist. Take photos, and you'll see interactions with that photo equipment when it shouldn't have. You'll have like a film camera, and you'll take various shutter light, with a camera flash, a big flash camera thing, and then an SLR camera, and it would actually, you'll have a time when that image exists, in a way it shouldn't have. You couldn't have had to change the shutter, frequency or anything, and it, you have a very, very apparent distortion of the image. And there's some times when you'll look into these experiments, and there's some things like the skull experiment's called in England. There's a SKOLE, I think it's the name of the experiment was. And they would take various phenomena and study it. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But I mean, it's something very peculiar, though. If it was, and it may well be, I'm not sure. But there's times when you look into these phenomena, and you'll realize it seems as if this couldn't possibly occur. I mean, how could it occur? How can you have energy that doesn't exist physically, in a sense? How does it manifest in ways that allows for interactions? The thing is, even like crystal radios, you'll have a radio with no battery source. And I guess it's partly what it's called scalar energy. It's energy that exists in the atmosphere that you can actually harness it. Tesla was into this. He was looking into, he even says the reality of life. If we go into the idea that the universe exists in ways that has, frequency, and we understand that, we can then understand reality, as it were. So all this time, people, I think there's little synchronicities and things, and things happen. We have understanding that there's actually some communication that exists in a way that we can't explain. You'll have a dream, for example, and that dream manifests, and you realize it seems to predict something. Or like before, Robin Williams, for example, he died. I never thought about this guy for years, pretty much, easily. I don't even watch movies. I don't do anything like that. But the very day he would have died, I just had this profound sort of thought. I thought, this guy was gone. I would, I'd miss a lot of, I'd feel, a profound loss, sort of, because I was actually watching, movies like, the, what are called, the Good Will Hunting, and he's in that movie, and I actually was affected by that. I was also affected by the movie, Dreams Will Come, or whatever it's called. And I imagined this movie, just thinking about it. I just knew in my mind that this particular movie sort of somehow reflected something that was happening at that time, and I couldn't explain it. But the next thing I know, you see in the news report, Robin Williams commits suicide, and so there's a connection sometimes that we just can't explain, or maybe we attribute to the synchronicities of things. But in truth, there's probably very likely some communication. It's like looking at the idea of crystal frequencies and how these transmit energies, and that our water in our bodies, 80% water supposedly, basically is a crystal. It's a crystal formation. You look at vibrations, you'll see the various attunement of water to that of frequency. And so you can study this, look at it, you realize this is what's happening. You have vibrations that exist in our day-to-day lives, and the way our brain works. It's like how you meditate. You can go and you realize how dynamic our minds are, how much things change. You go into alpha, you go into theta, delta, beta, or not beta, I don't know if beta's even, anyways, yeah, you go into different frequencies, and then you really realize that our state of mind, we can jump from one to the next so easily, and it's like, we are water, we are other things, obviously. Maybe you think I'm shit or bullshit, but the truth is, it's that's what it is. You really are interacting with harmonics like a radio. We're basically like a big antenna, and we absorb that energy. We also transmit it, even if we don't realize it. And there are times when you may realize that you have perhaps possibly interacted with the environment in ways that you cannot understand. And whatever that means, there's times that I've quite literally believed that I set off a street lamp, for example. I'll actually be photographing at night when it's raining, and I would be under a covered, area. And the same kind of thing happened, where I would be photographing, I had the camera flash on, and I was kind of weird with the camera back then, obviously you can tell. And the street light just went off, even though the flash didn't go off. And because the flash didn't go off, I was surprised. Apparently the thyristor, the battery pack, kind of absorber, it's like a buffer. It absorbs energy from the battery and prepares it for the release of energy to then allow the camera flash to go off, because it requires more power than the battery can just pull out of itself. So it needs a slow drain battery source that can then feed into a kind of like a capacitor, basically. It's what it is. It's a capacitor. And because I had flashed the camera off and absorbed, or it didn't have enough time yet, even though the light was still on, the kind of street lamp, and it just went off at the shutter speed. And because I was shocked, I felt that shock, or the surprise, basically, and see this light just totally go off. And ever since then, it's always been messed up. It hasn't been staying on. It goes off all the time now. I never had that before, ever. And it's been over 10 years now it's been doing that. But yeah, it's like things like that, or driving to a train track area. And I'll be thinking about this train. And this train would be in front of me, and it would actually, there's no train there actually, what it was, basically, but I'd be driving towards it, and I would actually just observe, thinking about this crossway, basically. And so, yeah, what it is, you have somehow, as I'm listening to this soundtrack, it's the Night Train by Guns N' Roses, I think it was, or no, I forget what it was actually. But yeah, I'm driving towards it, and that track I just kind of had in my mind sort of before it even started playing actually. And as I'm approaching, the crossing guard thing then I went down for a couple seconds, then it just went up. It wasn't a full sequence. It wasn't like here's the train guard thing. It's going to go down because it senses there's a train there. And somehow in that process, I guess it went back up. I guess maybe what it is, when your train was approaching, maybe there's a cross frequency or something. I don't know. All I know is it went right down as the song played off. And I was close enough to it to where I was, we stopped a little, and then it went back up. And so, I could say whatever. I believe it may have been correlated to other experiences I felt. Maybe it was just my mind was feeding into that signal. Or, I don't know. Somehow I may have had control over it. It's a strange thing, but, if we are frequencies, can we do that? Are we able to do that with our mind, for example? I don't know, but it's a possibility. There's a lot of things that happen. Maybe we should study meditation. Maybe we should study our diets, what we're drinking. Realize that maybe there's some things in our environment that aren't there conducive for us. That maybe we are enslaved, in fact. We are enslaved because we allow ourselves to be in our consciousness. That's kind of like the metaphor, just the idea of a rhetorical question, basically. So yeah, rhetorical question. We say we have our perceptions, our possibilities that we are enslaved because we allow ourselves to feed ourselves wrong information without questioning it. So we should always question information. We should always consider what it is we're being told and taught, and reevaluate that thought. Because yeah, even though it's possibly very true, the shared, agreed, common, communal consensus of thought and belief is more direct to the truth of a nature than the actual individual solidarity of thought. But likewise, think of this. Without those who innovated, without those who were perhaps a deviation of the norm, without those people questioning things and considering the possibility that we are wrong, and too often you'll see this. You'll see people who innovate, people who change paradigms, question things in ways that allow for new thoughts, new ideas, destroying the old. And some would say the only way to innovate is the old die off, the new born again. And so you have transition. You have transition, life and death. This sort of Trinity concept, this whole idea of life and death and then spirit. Spirit is the everlasting, the idea of unification with each other, with soul, with the idea of consciousness, sort of, and it may well even derive itself perhaps with the idea of what it is we exist as. Are we all communicating in like a binary computer system? What is it we're doing? I mean, some would say we're a hologram in our life. We're seeing things in a spectrum of hologram, sort of, but is it really a hologram? I don't think it is. I mean, I think we're looking at the idea of kind of a vibration. And now you have vibration attuned to one spectrum of light perception. And then the further up, you would have another perspective of what is attuned to that, like a radio frequency. Like you have a big, giant frequency wave pattern, and only that visible upon one stream of line going across that wave pattern would exist in a way that we see, kind of. I mean, what if we're communicating in ways that we just don't see, we don't understand, and we're all interacting, though, in the same level? We're still on the same full spectrum of frequency, only we're not attuned to the one spectrum that we can see or understand or interact with. But all throughout this, we have kind of like, this bouncing around of what is interacting in some ways. Like, you would have a transmit from one spectrum bouncing off another side of the spectrum, and then, maybe I'm borderline spectrum. I don't know. Well, no. Thinking about things in a way that just maybe we should understand things in a way that are different from the norm in order to understand it, because otherwise it's kind of like, how do you really make sense of it? And so, yeah, you could think of that and just wonder about it. Goodbye.